Hello, I'm Sarah Coates and you're watching I-24 News. We begin with the release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report into Russian collusion in the 2016 presidential election. With that investigation outlining 10 instances, Mueller investigated US President Donald Trump for possible obstruction of justice, although he did not find enough evidence to bring any charges. Attorney General William Barr holding a press conference ahead of the release of the report, saying that Russia did in fact attempt to interfere in the election, but no collusion was found between Trump and Russians.
As the special counsel report makes clear, the Russian government sought to interfere in our election process. But thanks to the special counsel's thorough investigation, we now know that the Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign.
Trump then speaking as the report was given to Congress. Here's what he has to say.
And they're having a good day. I'm having a good day, too. It was called No Collusion, No Obstruction. But I say it in front of my friends, this should never happen to another president again. This hoax, this should never happen to another president again. Thank you.
And joining me here in the studio is our senior international affairs correspondent, Owen Alterman. And in D.C., we have our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. Thank you both so much. Dan, I'll start with you. Well, President Trump today repeated that he's been completely exonerated. When you read the Mueller report, would you say the president's been cleared of all charges?
Well, of course, let's be completely fair and depend on the words of Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor himself. In the report that we've now seen, more than 400 pages, he writes, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. At another point, Mueller writes that if he could say positively that the president did not commit the crime of obstruction of justice, then he, Mueller, would state that. And so in many ways, he seems to be leaving that decision to Congress and to the public. Your opinion, my opinion. Mueller mentions, by the way, that he did not find the president's responses in writing to Mueller's questions to be adequate. And for the first time, we see the questions and answers, and several dozen times the president wrote, I have no recollection. I don't remember. I do not recall having had any discussion. And so Mueller wishes that he had questioned the president in person, but he said that a desire or a demand to do that would have led to a court fight, would have taken too long, and Mueller thought that he already understood what Trump was going to say. Sarah.
OK, Dan, I'll come back to you there in a moment. But Owen, tell us just how transparent has this entire process been?
Well, listen, obviously that's been a point of significant debate. What we can say is now that the report is out, Sarah, there are not giant blocks of redactions. Again, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we're not seeing, but there hasn't been a howl of protest about the redactions in most cases. That hasn't been really a focus of the discussion since the report at least came out. Again, what we see is a report that puts out some new information, interesting information that fills in the color of this story, and it helps to tell the story of what happened during that election campaign and afterwards as the investigation progressed. But I'm not sure it really changes much, at least from what we understand and have digested so far in terms of the way people will react and respond to Donald Trump. Interestingly enough, Israel does make a couple cameo appearances in the report. One, as the Trump transition team tried to change that UN resolution in the waning days of the Obama presidency, which at least formally you could argue violated American law, although I think most people would understand that it's not really so improper for a transition team to do what they did. And also interesting enough, George Papadopoulos, this Trump aide who struck a deal with the special counsel's office, was apparently being investigated at one point, not for being an agent of Russia, but for being an Israeli agent. It'll be interesting to hear more of the story about that, although we should say at the end he was not charged, so there was nothing criminal.
OK, let's go back now to Washington. And Dan, tell us, what are some of the details, including incidents that we didn't know about, that Mueller has now revealed?
Well, indeed, we have a little more information on that fellow, George Papadopoulos, who worked in the Trump campaign. As Owen says, the suspicion was he might have been working for Israel. He did finally actually admit to lying and served 14 days in prison. Now he says that everything about the special prosecutor was crooked. So Papadopoulos totally in the Trump camp. When it comes to the president himself, we have now learned for the first time how the president ordered his then White House counsel, Don McGahn, to make sure that the special prosecutor Mueller would be fired. Don McGahn refused to carry out that instruction. First, McGahn informed other people in the administration and said that he, McGahn, would fire. He didn't would resign. He said he didn't want to get involved in anything that Richard Nixon might have done in the early 1970s. In the end, Donald Trump backed off from that. One other incident we didn't know, Donald Trump Jr. and his email exchanges with WikiLeaks, encouraging WikiLeaks to time the release of anti-Hillary Clinton leaks. Does that mean that Trump Jr. knew that the leaks, the hacks, came from Russia? No evidence that Trump Jr. knew that or took part in the hacking. Therefore, not a crime. Could be embarrassing to the Trumps, though, of course, the president's not embarrassed about any of this at all. Sarah.
OK, and Owen, just tell me, now that this report has been released, do you believe that it will change people's perception of the president at all?
Not much. I mean, Sarah, coming into this report, the conventional wisdom is that no matter what the report said, it wasn't going to change any minds. Minds had been made up of Donald Trump long ago and haven't really shifted, even in the 4 years since he's been on the American political scene. My view was a little bit different. I said it would depend a little bit what was actually in the report, and I thought that there was something really explosive that it would really potentially change opinions. From what we've digested so far, that doesn't really seem to be the case. There is new information here, but it doesn't really change the general picture of the story, and a lot of the more explosive potential details were things that had already been out there. So I'm not sure that this really will change the trajectory of the Trump presidency. In fact, again, we've seen a lot of those signals being sent by the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates who will really set the political tone for Democrats over the next year or so. They're not so interested in talking about these investigations, and I think that the report as it's come out will only reinforce that. There may be some follow-up investigations on Capitol Hill. Does look like Bob Mueller will be coming up to testify sometime in the next month or so, and that is going to be fascinating. It'll be another major moment of the Trump presidency.
Certainly.
But I suspect 3 to 6 months from now, this may have receded into the background.
OK, and Dan, tell us, in Congress, what are the Democrats planning to do now?
Well, already we have a statement just a few minutes ago from the top 2 Democrats in Congress, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Together they say Attorney General Barr suggested that there is no evidence of obstruction of justice. That's not how we read it. That's basically what the Democratic Party leaders are saying. They are continuing to read the more than 400 pages, but they also are sending a subpoena to the Department of Justice saying, give us the entire report with no redactions. The Democrats are sounding like they think crimes were committed, and that opens up the possibility that House Democrats, they're the majority there, could start the process of trying to impeach the president. They might. Sarah?
And we're also hearing that Mueller was paying very close attention to some of Trump's public comments, even his tweets, which, of course, he does many of. Tell us, what is the importance of this?
Yeah, Sarah, you might be surprised at that many of the public comments and tweets are cited in the Mueller report. The special prosecutor says that sometimes public remarks by a president who has great power to make public remarks and affect things could even affect the jury in a trial, could affect a decision whether to prosecute someone, or could send a message to Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, to testify or not, or to Paul Manafort, who for a while was the campaign chairman. Maybe that's why Manafort stayed loyal to Trump and did not testify against anyone involved with the Trump campaign. And so that could be a form of obstruction of justice. That's why Mueller brought it up, though in the end he said he didn't find enough to act on obstruction of justice charges. Sarah?
OK, Dan Raviv in Washington, thank you very much. Owen Alterman, really appreciate it. And we're going out for a short break, but when we come back, we'll bring you all of the details of an I-24 News exclusive investigation into an Iranian terror cell exposed in Africa with plans to attack the West. All of that when we come back. Stay with us.
On stateside, it's not just about delivering the news. It's about giving meaning to the news and doing so with clarity. You'll get fact-based news and from where it happens. On stateside, we know that what happens around the rest of the world can have a huge impact on what happens here in the United States. And what happens in the United States can have a huge impact on the rest of the world. That's stateside.
It's ancient land, a holy land, and it's full of history. Holy Land Uncovered is a weekly magazine that examines the faith, the religion, the history of the land that's holy to 3 religions, taking you to places you might not otherwise see. Let Holy Land Uncovered take you there.
Watch Holy Land Uncovered, only on I-24 News.
From Hollywood to the Holy Land. We bring you all that's trending in lifestyle, arts, entertainment, and technology. Speaking to the culture catalysts which create, innovate, and inspire. Plus, what's turning heads in the social sphere. If it's creating a buzz, we've got it covered. Tune into Trending, only on I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's go now to an exclusive I-24 News report by our French channel correspondent Matthias Inbar. And it's been revealed that an Iranian terror cell has been exposed in Africa, which was planning to attack Western targets. The cell, known as Saraya Zahara, was revealed a few days ago after it established Quds Force infrastructure in Central Africa. That force began to establish itself in countries where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has worked to strengthen relations with Israel, such as Chad, Sudan and Eritrea. It's understood the objectives of the squad included attacking Western targets in Central Africa and Niger, underground activities to assist pro-Iranian elements to take power in various African countries, and establishing additional terror groups in Cameroon, Ghana, Congo and Nigeria. Now, according to the details revealed just a short while ago, the squad's budget was hundreds of thousands of dollars and its activity included the use of weapons. Here's the leader of the cell following his arrest by joint forces of Chad and the Central African Republic.
Je suis Ismaël Mohamed Chita. Je suis centrafricain. J'ai commencé l'activité de SLECA avec Michel. Michel a reçu $150,000. Ils ont parlé, en ce moment, ils ont parlé avec Michel, c'est pour créer un groupe ou créer une armée pour lutter contre les Occidentaux en Afrique. Les gens sont arrivés, ils sont venus de la clash, ça commence des pistolets, Kalachnikov, Belgique et recherche. Si j'ai de connaissances, on n'a qu'à collecter les gens, chaque pays 2 ou 3 personnes. Leur âge, ça ne va pas dépasser entre 25 et 35 ans pour ils sont, je sais pas, actifs pour aller les faire internement, et quand on va les faire internement, ils vont être prêts à sa disposition là qu'il veut, s'il veut faire attentat quelque part ou il veut faire quelque chose à faire. Donc il va parler avec eux, il va leur donner l'ordre pour exécuter.
And for more on this exclusive story, I'm joined here in the studio by IDF Colonel Reserve Olivier Rafowitz. Lovely to have you with me tonight. Olivier, tell me just how concerning is this, not just for Israel, but for the Western world?
It is very serious because it's not the first time that Iranian security forces outside Iran are trying to carry out attacks, terror attacks, and here we talk about a major Iranian military activity outside Iran against Western interest. I would say U.S. interest, maybe also Israeli interest, but also French interest on the soil of Africa. And generally, they are using Lebanese Shiite cells on the soil, but in this case, they were recruiting local African people according to money, but also, I believe, also according to religion, in order to carry out such attacks. It's a very serious issue.
Like you said, this isn't the first time that Iranian cells have been found operating outside of that country. How concerning is it that there may be more cells that have not been discovered?
There have been cells discovered in South America, but also on the soil of U.S., connected to Hezbollah. We know also that in West Africa, in the Maghreb, in Morocco, there have been ties have been severed by Morocco against Iran, because Iran was actually supporting the Polisario, which is a militia against the government of Morocco. Altogether, I mean, we can't believe that Iran is continuing to carry out such attacks on such, I would say, infrastructures on the soil of Africa, and it's really very worrisome.
And tell us, how sophisticated was this cell?
Listen, we talk here about money, about weapon, about smuggling weapon in these different groups. We talk also about recruiting local people in order to disguise the apparatus, the system, not to be discovered or released by the Western forces, but altogether, as you can see today and tonight, the U.S. and the Western officers and structures have actually disclosed the reality. Iran is actually stopped tonight, but Iran is continuing to operate on African soil against Western interest.
And potentially, tell us, how involved is Israel in discovering these cells?
I wouldn't tonight give details about this issue, but as you know, Israel is in war against the Iranian terrorist groups all over the world. And we see it in Lebanon, we see it in the Gaza Strip, we see it outside the state of Israel, and together with other major Western powers, the Israeli intelligence is actually working together in order to strike against Iranian terror cells all over the world. And I believe that in this issue, without disclosing any secret or any information,
Certainly.
I believe that Western interests and Western military and security, and mostly intelligence structures, have been operated in order to make this thing an end.
Olivier Rafowitz, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Let's go now to news just in on the failed Bereshit moon landing, and Israeli startup Space IL, which was behind the mission, says human error may have caused the spacecraft to crash into the moon.
We are resetting the spacecraft to try to enable the engine.
The Space IL team's been digging into what went wrong, now saying that the command triggered a chain of events which dashed the hopes of Israel becoming just the fourth country to land on the lunar surface. But not all has been lost, with work on the Bereshit 2.0 already underway. Now to more possible human error, and French investigators looking into the devastating fire which burnt most of the Notre Dame Cathedral say that an electrical short circuit was most likely behind it. An anonymous official speaking on the matter, adding that inspectors still are not allowed to go inside, but that is considered to be the most likely explanation. The fire broke out on Monday night, with French President Emmanuel Macron vowing to rebuild the 12th century cathedral. The Kremlin is today confirming that Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will meet in Russia later this month. The expected summit comes after the failed efforts from US President Donald Trump and his North Korean counterpart back in February. The US is seeking ways to end nuclear activity on the Korean Peninsula, with the US Special Envoy for the country, Stephen Biegun, in Moscow today. Our international correspondent Bianca Zanini reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un set to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin this month in Russia. The historical ties between the two countries and the recently failed summit between Pyongyang and Washington mean this meeting carries international political weight, economic possibilities, and sends a message to the world.
It keeps the United States on edge. It keeps Japan having an interest to get along with Russia and South Korea. And it's another way of Kim also not to be entirely in China's hands. It can also say, well, Russia's my friend too.
On Wednesday, North Korea's state media announcing the testing of a new tactical guided weapon. The tests were reportedly and importantly not of the long-range ballistic missiles, which are seen as a direct threat to the U.S. But when Pyongyang checks its weapons, the world and Washington listen. Shortly after the tests on Thursday, North Korea added it wants to remove U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo from future nuclear talks in favor of someone, quote, who can communicate more cautiously and more maturely. This as the Americans are doing their part to stay in the game and reach their deal. With U.S. envoy to North Korea Stephen Biegun in Moscow this week discussing Pyongyang's denuclearization.
What the South Koreans and the Russians want to see eventually is a railway route that goes from Seoul through North Korea, across Russia into Europe, because it will be a gateway for big Japanese and South Korean exports to get to Europe in a much more cost-advantaged way. It's something that also concerns the Chinese. And Russia will then have leverage with the Chinese as well.
Moscow might not have as much sway as Beijing or Washington, but with historical ties to Pyongyang and business ties to Seoul, Russia is in a unique position to talk to both sides. For Kim Jong-un, the chance to sit with yet another world leader continues to give him legitimacy as well as a stronger hand in the game. For Putin, the upcoming meeting is a chance to remind the world that Russia is still a significant player in the geopolitical landscape. Bianca Zanini, I-24 News.
Moving on, an Israeli flight attendant is the latest victim of a measles outbreak, fighting for her life in a critical condition. I-24 News' Alec Pollard reports.
The measles outbreak keeps spreading, and it's a global epidemic. A 43-year-old Israeli flight attendant slipped into a coma after contracting the disease on a flight to New York.
They're fighting for her life, but in the last couple of days, the situation is very, very complicated. She's in very, very critically ill situation. It's a problem. It's a big problem.
Israel was one of the first places where the disease has spread, mostly within ultra-Orthodox communities, which are not always adequately vaccinated. Without proper vaccination, measles is extremely contagious.
Measles is a childhood disease which has a vaccine. The disease is just spreading worldwide. It's a disease, it's an epidemic. Something that can be done by a vaccine is spreading all over again and damaging and hurting people.
Being in her 40s, the afflicted flight attendant had one vaccination, which is only 93% effective. Today, children receive 2 vaccinations, which provide near total immunity. Israeli health services are calling on people to get an extra vaccine if necessary. But the real problem starts with children who are not vaccinated at all. Ideological anti-vaccine movements are out of healthcare administrators' control.
The problem is with people who are not vaccinated. In the last decade, there's a huge, tremendous debate about vaccine, and measles, it's a part of the vaccine objection group, which are not get vaccine themselves and their kids.
A disease that was declared as eliminated in the U.S. in the turn of the century is very much alive at the moment, and while usually not deadly, remains a real problem across the globe. Alec Pollard, I-24 News.
More drama for Facebook, with the social media giant admitting today that it may have unintentionally uploaded the email contact details of around 1.5 million users since May 2016, another privacy breach for the company. Now, it released a statement saying the underlying cause was a glitch which was responsible for the leak, but it's now been fixed, adding that these contacts were not shared with anyone, and we're deleting them. Just last year, Facebook was slammed after it was revealed that data from millions of users was obtained to British political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica. And drama for Samsung too, with some of their new folding phones reportedly breaking just a few days after being taken out of the box. The product was unveiled a couple of months ago and is set to go on sale in the US in just over a week. But ahead of that release, Samsung gave phones to tech journalists, with some saying that the main display became damaged very fast. Now, the devices are one of the most expensive phones in the world, priced at around $2,000 US, with the manufacturer now saying it'll thoroughly inspect the broken ones to see what the problem is. And that is all we have time for this edition of i24 News, but we are continuing to bring you all the breaking stories, so do go ahead, visit us online. That's i24news.tv. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.